The movie begins with Frank Martin. Frank is a former special operations soldier, who is now a driver and a highly talented mercenary. He now lives in southern France, and is known as the transporter due to his occupation. He is preparing to carry out his contract-mandated task of delivering 3 guys from a private bank to a location. The clients who hired him as a driver turn out to be armed bank robbers. Frank doesn't appear to mind, because he will simply carry out his job and get paid as agreed. As a result, when he transports, he rigorously follows 3 rules: never change the deal, no names, and never open parcels. The bank robbers are 4 in total, which violates the agreement, and since Frank informed them he can only carry 3 persons, the leader of the gang threatens him with a gun. He refuses to continue the job. But Frank remains calm and adheres to the terms of the arrangement. He states that the increased weight would interfere with his well-planned getaway, so he refuses to drive. Since time is running out and the cops are approaching, the leader kills one of his men, and pushes him out of the car. After everything goes according to plan, Frank steps on the gas. As a professional driver, he can navigate tiny alleys and overcome barriers, to avoid being pursued by the police. After he successfully delivers the criminals to their destination, the leader, who is quite pleased with Frank's performance, offers him extra money to transport them to Avignon. Frank declines the offer, and prefers to return to his house on the French Riviera. When he arrives at the house, he immediately cleans his automobile, and changes the license plate. We then discover he has a secret closet full of fake license plates, that he frequently uses while on the job. He watches a television news broadcast about the arrests of the thieves, who are his ex-clients, and are attempting to flee elsewhere with their amateur driver. Following that, a local police inspector named Turconi comes to Frank's residence, and inquires about his black BMW, which is identical to the car used by the criminals as they fled the robbery scene. Turconi eventually quits, because he has no substantial proof against Frank. Soon, Frank receives a phone call from a prospective client, in need of his skills. At night, he meets the man, and agrees to deliver a 50-pound box to an American named Darren Betancourt. Frank requests a fee of $40,000 in advance, and the man agrees. The next day, the box is loaded into Frank's trunk. He sees the package moving as he is going to fix the flat tire and pull the spare tire out of the trunk. At this point, he breaks the 3rd rule, opens the package, and discovers a Chinese woman chained and gagged. He pours a glass for the woman, and continues on his way. However, the woman knocks on the trunk of the car in the middle of the road, and when he opens the gag in her mouth, the woman named Lai tells him she needs to pee. He brings the woman out of the trunk, feeling terrible for her. However, Lai attempts to flee, forcing him to take quick steps to apprehend her. When he returns her to the car, 2 police officers notice him, so he is compelled to paralyze them, and place them in the trunk along with Lai, who faints. Frank arrives at his location after a lengthy trek, and delivers the package to Betancourt as promised. When Betancourt inquires whether he has opened the item, Frank lies, and states he had not. When he is about to leave, Betancourt offers him another job, delivering a suitcase, which happens to be in the same way as the return road to Frank's house, so he accepts. He stops momentarily on the way to eat and buy drinks for the cops in his trunk. As he is ready to get back into his car, it explodes, killing the police officers who were in his trunk. It turns out a bomb meant to murder Frank was put in the briefcase Betancourt gave him, in order to silence him about the shipment he was bringing. An outraged Frank returns to Betancourt's location, where he kills and injures numerous goons. Frank then grabs one of the escape vehicles, only to discover Lai bound and gagged in the back seat. He lowers her, still bound and gagged, into the middle of the road. However, not long after, he feels sorry for her, returns and picks her up. He takes her to his house, provides her with food and a place to sleep for the night, and requests Lai to leave the next day. When Frank goes to bed, Lai covertly explores his luggage, and discovers that he is a former Air Force soldier, and a highly trained soldier. She also believes that he is actually a good person. Meanwhile, Betancourt pays a visit to one of his men, who is still alive in the hospital, to find out who assaulted his home. Betancourt kills his men after discovering Frank was the one who had attacked his place. Turconi returns to Frank's house, as Lai prepares breakfast for him. Turconi suspects Frank after his car was discovered on fire not far from here, and the dead police officers were discovered in his trunk. And his car had been stolen while he was there. Frank states he had gone to the area the day before. Turconi is skeptical, and asks him again. However, Lai enters and confirms his alibi, introducing herself as the chef and his new girlfriend. Turconi finally leaves his residence, failing to locate any proof linking him to what happened to his car. Frank requests Lai to leave his house. However, Betancourt and his soldiers attack Frank's residence with indiscriminate shooting. Frank immediately brings Lai to a safe location. Betancourt orders his soldiers to launch missiles on Frank's house, and Frank and Lai are inside. When the missiles are fired at them, they barely make it to the underwater channel, where Frank had prepared his diving gear for an emergency, and swims to the next safe house. The next day, Frank and Lai are summoned to the police station for an interrogation by Inspector Turconi about what happened to his residence. Turconi questions him about the individual who attacked his house. However, he claims since he was swimming in the sea with Lai at the time of the occurrence, he has no idea who it was. Turconi is once again skeptical of his words. His interview, however, is cut short when one of his men informs him the police commissioner wants Turconi to see him right now. When Turconi leaves his office, Lai takes advantage of the chance to access his computer to gather information regarding Betancourt, which she shares with Frank. Turconi lets Frank and Lai go because he doesn't have enough proof to hold them at the police station any longer. Frank, who had been assumed dead by Betancourt, wants to put a stop to all of this, rebuilding his villa and starting a new life, and recommends Lai to do so, instead of getting further engaged with Betancourt, putting their lives in danger. She states that Betancourt is a human trafficker, who had 400 Chinese people confined in shipping containers, including her father and siblings. He would enslave them and sell them. When he hears this, Frank feels pity for her, and is determined to assist her in saving her family. They head to Betancourt's office. When Frank arrives, he quickly assaults Betancourt, and points a gun at him, while Lai is looking for documents pertaining to the container containing 400 Chinese, including her family. Kwai is a human trafficker and his business partner. Betancourt informs Frank that Lai's father. Now Frank assumes Lai had duped him. However, when Kwai and his thugs arrive, Lai instead points a gun at her father. She eventually heeds her father's commands, and lays down her weapon. Kwai's henchmen apprehend Frank, and Betancourt informs him there are only 395 Chinese in the container. Turconi rushes to Betancourt's office and finds Frank unconscious, after discovering information about him on his computer. When Turconi arrives, Kwai and Betancourt accuse Frank of kidnapping Lai, and attempting to blackmail them. Turconi directs his men to stop and kill Frank, and pushes Frank to tell him what had transpired. Frank tells him about the hundreds of Chinese individuals being detained in containers, and going to be traded as slaves by Betancourt and Lai's father. Turconi offers to help Frank escape from prison, and pretends as a phony hostage, then frees him, realizing Frank will not be bound by a search order, and will be able to solve the case faster than the police. In the evening, Frank, who had prepared everything, follows Betancourt and his gang to the Marseille docks, where they would load the containers into trucks. However, he gets discovered, and a gunfight between him and Betancourt's thugs is now unavoidable. Frank gets into difficulty when he tries to stop the truck, leaping on it, and Betancourt's men manage to knock him unconscious. Frank next has to contend with Kwai's thugs, who ganged up on him with razor-sharp weapons, as well as Betancourt's greatest fighter, who is extremely difficult to defeat. He is finally able to overthrow them all, using all his combat abilities. For that, Betancourt dispatches his armed men to go for Frank, which prompts the latter to flee, drowning himself in the ocean. After that, he grabs an old car, and makes an attempt to follow the truck that is hauling the container. As daylight arrives, the rusty car grinds to a halt on the desolate country road. Frank makes a beeline in the direction of a farm, as soon as he spots a small plane flying in that direction. The owner of the plane is confronted with a gun by Frank, who orders him to fly him onto the highway, while following a truck carrying containers. After coming close enough, Frank jumps out of the plane, and parachutes to a landing directly on top of one of the automobiles. In a moment, he brings the truck driver to the ground. On the other hand, Betancourt is there and makes an effort to halt Frank. After a drawn-out brutal confrontation, Betancourt and 3 of his goons are killed, when Frank throws them out of a moving vehicle, therefore ending the conflict. After recovering control of the truck, Frank drives the container truck to a safe location, and unloads its cargo. However, just as he is about to depart the truck, Kwai points a gun at him, and leads him to the edge of a cliff, with the intention of covering up his crime. Since Kwai's daughter had disobeyed his commands, and sided with the slaves, even Kwai gives the order for his men to put Lai to death. Frank is eventually rescued by Lai, who, against her better judgment, takes a gun to her own father, and murders him. After that, Inspector Turconi and the rest of the police arrive, and they free the people who were being held captive in the 2 containers, congratulating Frank on his work. The end.